Welcome back to Street Level Marketing with your host, Mark Lamplugh. I'm here talking with Joanna Track, who is the founder of Good Eggs. And, we're talking about content marketing and her approach and, how our agency, uh, you know, does it. So, in your approach, Joanna, on building a content strategy from scratch, with a new client, like how do you start the process?
So the process, it depends. I mean, there's a lot of different permutations, but there's usually two scenarios that happen. One is that they have a history of doing stuff. And so we want to review and assess all that along with other stuff, which we'll talk about. And the other is when it's a startup and like this is a go-to-market plan, or it's a company that just really hasn't delved into content marketing. And we have had quite a number of those. So there's not a lot of, or there's no historical information to look at. But in both scenarios, it's a checklist of, give us what you can. And we always say more is better. We give people, we want their analytics. We want any historical. We want their business plans, their strategies. We want to talk to people, their stakeholders. And then we kick off with a 2-hour brainstorm session. And it's so funny that so many clients have said to us at the end that it felt like therapy in a positive way. Because it's their opportunity to really just share everything that's on their mind and that what they've, been trying to accomplish, the things that have bothered them, the things they see out there that they envy or admire. And so we have this moment, and they always say, well, what's the agenda? And we do have an agenda. We have a guideline we follow to make sure we cover the key topics, like who do you feel is your target audience? What do you feel your brand stands for? Who are your key competitors? All the traditional stuff you would want from a due diligence perspective. But the conversation is very, it goes in whatever way it wants. And I always say to them, this is your time. You tell us whatever you think you want us to know to help us, understand what's in your head and your business the most. So from there, we take all that information and we do a deep dive. We scan the competitive landscape. We, all the typical stuff. And then we put together we always say even our first presentation is still a draft, of course. We want their feedback and input. And it's really a collaborative dialogue because, as much as we know, they know their business best. So we take that as a starting point. But the other thing that we really pride ourselves in, because one of the things that gives a lot of traditional agencies a bad rap is spending all this time and a client's money on a strategy, and then they present it. And the client's like, this is great, but now what do I do? Like, it's really too high level, thought, but not a lot of action. So we have really created a model where we say, of course, we'd like you to work with us and continue on a long-term relationship, but you could walk away with this document and it would be your manual, your guidebook on how to do this. It's very specific. So like, for example, social media, how many posts a week, what, when you should post them, what the topics, sample calendars, like it's all there. So, and then, we give them sort of the marching orders of how we think it should roll out and the whole thing. But like I said, it's a draft and we go through some iterations, make sure everyone's on the same page. Also budgets are finite. So maybe they have to choose between a few things, and then we hone it down and then hopefully get to, as we say over here in Good Eggs, we get cracking.
What are some of the common strategic mistakes you see companies make in content marketing?
Well, that's a whole other show, but high level. One of our Good Eggs isms we always say is serve before you sell, because one of the biggest mistakes I see is that people just use content marketing, like I said before, as like a long form ad. And that's not what it is. It's about being authentic, telling a story, and serving before you sell, adding value, giving people something. Another principle we go by is that every piece of content should incorporate at least one of the 3 E's, which is to entertain, enlighten, and or educate. So you need to be giving people something, which also means you're playing a long game. And so one of the other mistakes is that people having short-term thinking or looking for instant gratification with content marketing. It's literally the opposite of performance marketing. Performance marketing, you're looking for an immediate action to your action. And this is about giving people and building the loyalty and affinity and credibility that people are going to trust you and follow you, and then in the end become your, whether they're your most loyal customers or advocates, whatever it is, it's more fruitful in the long run.
Yeah, I always say, with social media, it's not, companies will say, well, I'm not getting any engagement on my posts and nobody's sharing anything or nothing's happening, but all they post is advertising of their products. And it's like, one, have you ever went to somebody else's social
And
media or one of your friends and saw them sharing ads? No,
right.
it's not called sales media, it's called social media.
Yeah, well, we have a joke up here is that we say nobody's engaging because you said, you just hired Joe Smith, or you did. The only people who like that post are like the people who work at the company.
That's so true. How do you balance SEO driven content with storytelling?
Yeah, so actually that is an area that we're really, really proud of, because I said I kind of grew up in my entrepreneurial journey building digital publications. I really grew a unique expertise where I'm a marketer by my sort of early skill set, but then I went into publishing and editorial. And the team I amassed, of which they're here today with me, they also have that unique skill set. So we have this unique balance of building SEO content based on working with our SEO research team to make sure we're hitting the keywords and following the format and hitting all of Google's standards, but then we write content that is actually engaging and interesting. Whereas a lot of SEO agencies, and I'm not saying all, I'm generalizing, they build what we call keyword soup. It's an SEO article when it's like the same word over and over, and nobody's interested in it. We build content. We were like, okay, like how do we take this article and write it like we would write any other editorial? Like a lot of my writers come from journalist backgrounds, and I taught them best practice marketing.
How often should brands revisit and refresh their content strategy?
Oh, well, I mean, part of me wants to be crass and say daily, but I mean, there's sort of, you should always be testing, learning, optimizing. That to me is like a never ending process. But I feel like, you look macro level, like probably a few times a year. And then on the monthly, weekly, biweekly basis, you're looking at what's performing, fine tuning based on what you're seeing, especially in like social media, for example, where you can see within a matter of days what's working, where the engagement is, like subjects that really hit, say on LinkedIn. Well, then, that's a topic that's going to interest your audience. So then you should then be planning out, not just blindly looking ahead saying, okay, what are we going to talk about next? You need to assess what's happened in order to make better decisions for what you do next.
How do you tailor the content across the platforms like social media, blogs and newsletters?
Well, so this is going back to the question about the biggest mistake people make is thinking that they can create one thing and then just splatter it across all the channels. You can leverage it across the channels. You need to tailor it to that medium. So we always say you start with the idea and then you figure out what channel it's going to go on. You don't start with the channel first. So, you're talking about a subject and you say, this topic would work well as a video on LinkedIn, and it would be a great Q&A interview for an email. And, I don't know, whatever else. So you have to tailor what is the best message for that particular medium.
What's your stance on repurposing content?
Yeah, like we do it. I mean, and we always say to clients too, you're better off only operating in one social media channel and doing it really well than trying to spread yourself across a couple and doing them just mediocre. For that reason, as you know, that, certain formats and messaging works differently on the different channels. But if you have limited budget, like we have plenty of clients who create videos for TikTok and then they repurpose them pretty much as is on Instagram, although we do really encourage strongly that there is some editing and some changing of formats to tailor it. But again, budgets are finite and you can only manage so much. But if given only the two choices, I would stay on one channel and win at it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think going into like my next question is it makes it a little bit easier with a lot of the content creation tools now to resize and repurpose the
Mhm.
content to fit towards, what channel you're putting it on. Do you have any specific tools that you use for planning and managing your content?
Well, my team does. They're very astute in that. They have a multitude of tools, but yeah, I agree with you. Like the amount of time, energy, money that it used to take to repurpose something can now be done in, a matter of minutes, resizing, editing graphics, cutting, like when I see them, editing videos down and all that, I mean, it's remarkable how quickly they can do it now. But it goes back to planning and strategizing in advance. You need to know, even from when you record a video or write something, like this is the ultimate outcome of it, because trying to retrofit back into that, it doesn't usually work out very well.
Great. Well, we're out of time for this segment. When we come back, I want to talk about, how you manage a collective of experts. So we'll be back after a word from these sponsors.